nonsense.
YouTubers very seldomly get a chance to make a film, let alone a theatrical film, that actually presents itself with the quality of an industry film. Which also makes it extremely unfortunate that Hollywood seems to be trying to hide this movie's success. As when you check the domestic box office numbers, Iron Lung was doing well, and now it's completely missing from the charts. Now, like I said, because this is an example very much of a YouTuber creating a film rather than YouTubers who ended up getting into the film industry, there's a lot more critical analysis going into this type of film from all sorts of parties. Whether you're a pretentious snob and looking for an absolutely perfect film, or even just a fan of Markiplier and maybe are just scared you'll not be able to see him outside of his character. There's a lot of risks embarking on a project like this, and personally, I walked away from the film extremely satisfied. Now to clarify, I'm not a super huge fan of Markiplier. I've seen a few of his videos, I think he's a very positive and nice personality, but his was just not the type of content I really consumed. Still, when I heard that he was making this movie, especially considering the game itself has a lot of lore but not much cinematic value, I was very curious to see if he'd pull this off. And in my opinion, he definitely did, in executing an almost perfect example of a cosmic horror film. Now, most people who watch the channel know that when we look for a good series, we look for good world building, good narrative arcs, and really good character development. And we're also very forgiving of maybe more minor details that seem more trivial than anything. That being said, I went into this film with not the highest of expectations, as I only seen one interview before walking in, and they made it seem sort of like a 50-50 movie. So for me, I just expected a somewhat decent horror film like a lot of others that have been released in these past few years. But oh boy, this film definitely checks a lot of the boxes I like as a fan. You got your sci-fi elements, but they're not heavy on the technology aspect, this sort of rustic sci-fi feel. You also have the realistic dialogue where characters talk to each other like actual human beings, which I can always appreciate. You have world building that isn't just thrown out in an exposition and you slowly piece together throughout the story, which for analytical types like myself, this is the type of stuff we go into stories for. This film doesn't treat the audience like a bunch of YouTubers hoping to watch a walkthrough gameplay. It treats it like a narrative story capturing the world building it needs to and dropping its breadcrumbs at such convenient moments that help you build up the intrigue. But another thing this film builds up well is suspense. Mind you, it's hard enough to have an entire film based in one single location and have it be good taking place in a regular reality. But to have the same concept and put it into a universe that is extremely different from our own and with a history that is very much otherworldly, it takes a really passionate writer to really include all these details in the subtle ways they do and in such a cohesive manner that they did here. And despite all this otherworldly aesthetic, you find yourself easily rooting for the character of Simon, who Mark is playing. Despite his very existence and full history being heavily involved in the wild lore of the world surrounding this series, he still comes off as just a regular guy who simply wants to live, being forced into a situation and facing off against things that would break anyone's mind, and likely has. You spend a lot of time introducing these characters in a way that isn't, hey, this is prisoner so, he did this, we're sending him down because of that. They instead utilize the dialogue between characters to not only explain their backstories, but also build up tension. And to kind of explain, we have to go into spoilers, so I highly recommend watching this movie if you haven't already. Otherwise, this guy who's being sent down into the bottom of a giant blood ocean is mainly just worried that these people are gonna screw him over. It's as he's navigating this ship, its mechanics, and taking screenshots of what he can, that we slowly piece together a bit more about the world. Now personally, as someone who never really fully played Iron Lung but watched a playthrough, I had already seen a bit about the lore, and I feel it was utilized extremely well within this movie. Though since it's been a while, there's always a chance that I might have forgotten a thing or two. Still, it tells the story of this sort of quiet rapture, a moment where all life seemed to have been snuffed out in a moment's notice, leaving only the many space stations in our solar system of humans left. And over time, these space stations came together to form two different colonies, one being Eden, who supposedly had the last tree on Earth, or signs of vegetated life, prone to being very religious and kind of accepting of humanity's inevitable fate. Then you have another colony in the consolidation of iron. These people were more focused on figuring out what happened and finding answers in a will to survive at any means cost. Either way, these two colonies inevitably follow human nature and begin conflict with each other, with Eden attacking a station known as Filament Station. And after the battle was over, the COI eventually captured many Eden soldiers, thus creating the Iron Lung program, where they basically send people into these giant blood oceans, as it's way more beneficial to send some convicts from another colony than to send some of your own people. Things happened a little fast, and the audio was a little bit hard to piece together, so I couldn't fully figure out what Simon's backstory was, has, but as far as I could tell, he was with a group of Eden soldiers and they were planning on killing a lot of people, and he wasn't necessarily all for that. Eventually, some bombs were planted, he tried to stop them, and in trying to do so, he was either abandoned or betrayed by his fellow soldiers, leading to his capture by the COI and then forcing him down into this moon. And when he's brought back to the surface so they can attach something to the iron lung to collect a sample, they don't even give him a chance to breathe, not really disclosing all the information they should to him and sort of letting him know that they're sending him right back down. Still, it was their lack of communication with him that led to him doing what he did next, which essentially part of his job is to go down beneath the blood ocean and take these snapshots of whatever he can find in the surrounding environment. However, because he's taking snapshots through thick red blood, the equipment needed has to be like an amplified X-ray, meaning when he presses the button back on the surface and takes a picture of all the workers, he exposes them all to lethal doses of radiation, them immediately losing any sort of civil behavior they were putting towards him and now treating him like a convict they're sending to die. Which this subtle change in dynamic is needed for horror films like this, as I fully expected Mark or Simon to just be this angry guy who was put through the ringer for no reason. Now, narratively, Simon has a sense of guilt and reason to sort of keep going with this mission. The only problem is, we find out over time that within this blood ocean, there is another living creature. Throughout the beginning of the story, because of the images taken by the snapshots, it's hard to piece together what exactly he's looking at. But through the dialogue, you can tell that he thinks something's alive down there. And when they eventually reveal what that thing looks like, I really appreciated how they shot it. See, we follow Simon as he's doing his busy work throughout the iron lung, and at one point takes the snapshot like he's normally been doing, only this time the camera doesn't follow him to his next task. Instead, we cut back to his shocked expression looking at the snapshot, and when we see the snapshot, we see a demonic sea creature staring right down at him. Very much a more horrifying version of what we see in the games. Either way, at some point in the story, he does end up losing contact with the COI, and in trying to navigate things by himself without any assistance, he ends up coming across a previously sent submarine. This one was supposedly different from the rest of the iron lungs in that it was a research vessel that supposedly collected a lot of important data. And as the subtle horror evolves of being isolated alone and stalked by a giant sea creature, we eventually see something else is lingering down there too. This is when the more cosmic horror elements of the story begin to take place. We see as Simon is slowly manipulated by these voices by potentially previously sent iron lung convicts, or just the entity itself, and as things get trippier and trippier, he's offered to experience what this veil has to offer, with them claiming that he needs to fully let everything go. Yet throughout the movie, he holds on to this pendant of his past, and when eventually coming face to face with whatever eldritch cosmic god this is on the Blood Moon, he's simply pulled back by his pendant still latching on beneath the Blood Sea surface. Visually, I was not expecting this level of effects going into this film, but I was definitely pleasantly surprised, and as a cosmic horror fan, I very much enjoyed the aesthetics here. Again, like with a lot of cosmic horror films, on paper it sounds a little different than just simply experiencing it yourself. Either way, Simon eventually wakes up and makes contact back with the COI, and despite their beef and Ava, the COI representative, being riddled with tumors, they end up working together to try to go and collect the data that was sent by the old submarine research vessel. And this part kind of got confusing to me in film, but I'm pretty sure Ava ended up jumping in another iron lung and joining him down below. Again, the reason it was kind of confusing was because he was hearing voices from not only the COI, but also the entity trying to manipulate him as well. But I'm pretty sure they both end up making it down there, collecting the data through the black box, and while Simon's being pulled in either direction, the eldritch entity seemingly trying to stop that knowledge from getting out, and Ava begging Simon to please get that back to the surface, you eventually see through all these snapshots this thing slowly take Ava down and eventually catch up to Mark's iron lung. It's here the cosmic horror really presents itself, and you see as the iron lung is being encased in these vines and weird substances and filled with blood, and you see as Mark fights to get the black box prepared, his hands and limbs becoming attached to the piping around him, and him slowly trying to tear himself away from the iron lung in order to finish the mission, at one point even trying so hard that he rips off his entire arm. And the same dude who was pretty much placed out of his control into these situations, the same person who has already endured so much and just wanted to live throughout this entire movie, has now set his own wants and needs aside and seen something bigger than himself, with him mustering up all his strength to take what he has left of his body and finish the mission. This apparently results in the iron lung and the creature themselves exploding deep beneath the Blood Sea, not necessarily defeating the entity by any means, but successful in sending the data box back up to the surface. And we see as there's lights that descend down upon it. In my opinion, this was a perfectly wrapped up film, and they don't really need a sequel, as I feel like it would not really live up to how this film was presented. And in my opinion, it was presented very well. As someone who watches a lot of movies and loves cosmic horror, it's very hard to get it presented right on screen most times without it just being a subtle visual detail. The closest two movies I can think of to being great, perfect examples of cosmic horror would be both The Color Out of Space and The Void. However, I'm happy to say I can officially add Iron Lung up there in the top 3 list for best cosmic horror movies out there right now. But in regards to making a cosmic horror film for general audiences, it's kind of hard to do. I can safely say this movie nailed in all the aspects it needed to make a quality film in my opinion. So seriously, props off to Mark. Hopefully this shows the industry that YouTubers are capable storytellers as well. And if you haven't seen this movie, again, seriously, just go watch it. If not to support the efforts of one single YouTuber, to support the idea of creativity coming from any outlet at all. I think my only real gripe with this film is there was some point in the middle that felt a little tedious, where the pacing just seemed to drag on for a tiny bit. Again, this had to be developed so we could get a very shocking reveal at some point, which in my opinion, if there's tedious nature used to build up a character or a story, then I'm okay with it. Hence why I like shows like Breaking Bad or Pluribus. Either way, I want to know what you guys think. Was this a solid film? Is this a film you would check out if you haven't already? And how could you see a sequel to this story that we've already had established? Either way, let me know down below, and seriously, go watch this movie.